The faded daguerreotype, its surface clouded by a century and a half of gentle abrasion, depicted three solemn-faced children. Two girls, their dresses stiff with Victorian propriety, flanked a younger boy whose wide, unblinking eyes seemed to borrow light from another era. On the surface, it was a quintessential 19th century family portrait, one of countless such artifacts lovingly preserved in attics or inadvertently discarded. The sepia tones, the slightly blurred edges, the backdrop of an imagined garden, all spoke of a bygone era, a fleeting moment captured for eternity. Yet something subtly disquieting resonated beneath this veneer of antique charm, a discordant note in an otherwise harmonious visual symphony. It wasn't the children's expressions, though their seriousness was notable even for the period, nor was it any oddity in their attire. The unsettling detail, almost imperceptible to the casual observer, resided in their hands. Each sibling held their hands in a distinctly unusual posture, a collective arrangement that felt less like an accidental pose and more like a deliberately crafted, almost coded configuration. The eldest girl's fingers were interlaced in a peculiar knot. The younger girl's dominant hand formed an intricate, almost ritualistic gesture, while the boy's small fist was clenched around something invisible, his thumb tucked into his palm in a manner that seemed unnatural, almost forced. This subtle peculiarity, this silent collective declaration from the past, lay waiting for the right eyes to decipher its meaning. Enter Dr. Eris Thorne. His world was a tranquil labyrinth of aged paper, forgotten inks, and the hushed whispers of history. A man whose very being seemed steeped in the scent of parchment and quiet contemplation, Dr. Thorne was widely recognized as a meticulous art historian, a scholar whose singular focus lay in the obscure, often overlooked genre of 19th century family portraiture. He possessed an uncanny ability to peel back the layers of time, not merely to identify painters or stylistic periods, but to unearth the deeply personal, often poignant, narratives embedded within these frozen moments. His academic life unfolded in a stately brick building on a quiet university campus, surrounded by overflowing bookshelves, meticulously cataloged archives, and the gentle hum of scholarly pursuit. He owned an impressive collection of historical documents, each one a potential key to unlocking some forgotten truth. His days were a careful dance between intense research and thoughtful reflection. His evenings often spent poring over microfiche or digital scans until the early hours. He lived for the thrill of discovery, the quiet satisfaction of connecting disparate pieces of information to form a coherent, compelling story. The portrait in question, newly acquired by Dr. Thorne from a rather dusty, anonymous estate sale, initially presented itself as another run-of-the-mill example of its kind. He had purchased it on a whim, drawn by the quality of the glass and the faint, almost ethereal glow of the children's faces. He brought it back to his study, placing it carefully on an easel beneath a directional lamp, intending to file it away after a perfunctory examination. Yet, as he adjusted the light, his keen eyes, trained over decades to spot the slightest deviation from the conventional, snagged on the children's hands. At first, he dismissed it. Perhaps the photographer had given odd instructions, or the children were simply fidgeting, settling into uncomfortable positions that happened to be captured by the slow shutter speed of the era. But the more he looked, the more an undeniable, almost palpable sense of intentionality began to emanate from the image. It wasn't just one child, it was all three. The hands, carefully positioned, held an inexplicable pull, a magnetic force that tugged at his scholarly curiosity. There was something in their synchronized, almost ritualistic arrangement that whispered of a language unspoken, a secret held tight within the silent frame. He found himself returning to the portrait again and again throughout the evening, a nascent hypothesis beginning to form in the quiet corners of his mind. This was no mere photographic eccentricity. This was a message. This was a code. And he, Dr. Eris Thorne, felt an insatiable urge to unlock it. The seemingly ordinary old family portrait had quickly transformed into a perplexing mystery, its antique charm now imbued with an unsettling undercurrent. The subtle, almost coded arrangement of the siblings' hands was far too deliberate to be accidental. This quiet, unassuming image had now laid down a challenge, and Dr. Thorne, with his lifetime dedicated to uncovering the forgotten stories of the past, found himself irresistibly drawn into its silent depths. He knew with a certainty that hummed in his bones that this journey into the past, into the lives of these three solemn children, was only just beginning. Before we delve deeper into this perplexing mystery, make sure to subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell so you don't miss our next historical deep dive. Dr. Thorne's initial curiosity regarding the peculiar hand positions in the recently acquired portrait rapidly escalated, morphing into an all-consuming obsession. He found himself unable to focus on anything else. The image of the three children and their subtly contorted fingers burned into his mind. He tried at first to rationalize it away, convincing himself it must be a mere artistic flourish, a stylistic eccentricity of the anonymous painter, or perhaps simply an awkward moment captured forever. He spent hours poring over art history texts, consulting countless volumes illustrating portraiture techniques and common poses from the 19th century. He meticulously cross-referenced his findings with his vast digital archive, searching for any comparable examples. Yet, the more he researched, the more an unsettling truth solidified. There was no standard pose, no conventional artistic trope, no prevailing fashion that explained the precise, almost deliberate arrangement of the siblings' hands. The subtle variations, the way one finger curled more tightly than another, the slight elevation of a thumb, the precise bend of a wrist. These details were too consistent across the three figures, yet too unique to be random. They defied all established norms, standing out as a silent yet insistent anomaly. His days became a blur of archival dust and low-lit study lamps. Sleep offered little respite. As the enigmatic hands danced behind his eyelids, each gesture a silent question. He felt a growing conviction that these were not accidental placements, but intentional communications, a hidden language embedded within the ostensibly innocent family tableau. This nascent theory, whispered tentatively to his reflection in the antique glass of a framed map, began to define his research. He knew intellectually that the path he was embarking on was fraught with academic peril. Such a granular, speculative interpretation could easily be dismissed as over-analysis, a scholar projecting meaning where none existed. The primary obstacle, however, wasn't a vocal antagonist in the traditional sense, but something far more pervasive and insidious: the sheer overwhelming weight of history itself, or rather the lack thereof. The family depicted in the portrait remained stubbornly anonymous, their lineage a faded trail of sporadic, often contradictory records. The portrait's provenance was a murky narrative of auction house transactions and vague collector notes. Every lead seemed to dissipate into the ether of forgotten time, leaving Dr. Thorne to grapple with the frustrating ambiguity of the past. He attempted to trace the painting's journey, hoping a geographical origin might unlock clues, but each potential birthplace offered no clearer answers. The deeper he delved, the more isolated he felt in his pursuit. His initial attempts to solicit opinions from colleagues were met with polite yet unmistakable skepticism. Dr. Eleanor Vance, a respected contemporary who specialized in Victorian portraiture, had listened patiently before offering her practiced dismissal. "Eris, my dear fellow," she had said, her tone a carefully modulated blend of condescension and concern, "sometimes a hand is just a hand. Artists had their quirks. Perhaps the children were simply fidgeting, or the painter found it an aesthetically pleasing arrangement without any deeper meaning." Her words, though gently spoken, stung. They echoed the very doubts he sometimes harbored himself, Yet instead of deterring him, they only fueled his resolve. He became determined to prove that this was not merely artistic eccentricity, that the patterns he perceived were not figments of his overactive academic imagination. His colleagues' dismissive attitudes, while frustrating, ironically became a powerful motivator. He would unearth the truth, not just for his own intellectual satisfaction, but to vindicate his instincts. Driven by this unwavering conviction, Dr. Thorne expanded his research into increasingly esoteric fields. He began cross-referencing known secret societies of the 19th century, sifting through accounts of Masonic gestures, obscure fraternal orders, and even rumored political subgroups that employed nonverbal signals. He painstakingly studied rudimentary forms of sign language from the period, recognizing that while modern sign languages were largely systematized later, earlier forms of manual communication existed, often within specific communities or for the deaf. He scoured forgotten linguistic histories, searching for any mention of coded hand communications or gestural alphabets. He even delved into studies of symbolism in folk art and mythology, hoping to find a system, however obscure, that aligned with the visual cues so tantalizingly displayed in the portrait. His office, already overflowing with books and documents, soon became a labyrinth of printouts, photographic reproductions of other paintings, and meticulously organized index cards detailing every conceivable hand gesture he could find. He contacted experts in various tangential fields, a historian specializing in Victorian-era communication methods, a folklorist who studied regional superstitions, even a semiotician who examined visual signs and symbols. More often than not, he was met with disinterest, or at best, polite academic dismissal. "Fascinating theory, Dr. Thorne," one expert had emailed back, "but without further contextual evidence, it remains highly speculative." Each rejection, each unanswered query, each professional shrug only deepened his isolation, but simultaneously it hardened his resolve. He knew, with an almost spiritual certainty, that the answer lay hidden within those silent, painted hands, and he would not rest until he had uncovered their secret. The fading trail of history might be an antagonist, but it was one he was prepared to tirelessly pursue. The dusty archives and the skepticism of his peers had done little to deter Dr. Thorne. In fact, they had only ignited a fervent determination within him. His belief in the portrait's hidden language was not merely academic curiosity, but a deep, almost spiritual conviction. He had spent weeks poring over obscure texts, his fingers stained with ancient ink, his eyes weary, but alight with an inner fire. Then, late one night, as the city slept, it happened. He was examining a faded leather-bound volume, a collection of regional folklore from the late 18th century, largely dismissed by mainstream historians as fanciful peasant tales. Tucked away within its yellowed pages, almost as an aside, was a small, crudely drawn illustration. It depicted a group of villagers engaged in what appeared to be a ceremonial dance, their faces obscured by shadow. But one figure, in the foreground, was shown with their hands positioned in a strikingly familiar manner. A delicate curl of the fingers, a subtle tilt of the wrist, almost precisely mirroring one of the siblings in the portrait. A jolt ran through Dr. Thorne. It wasn't an exact replica, but the resemblance was undeniable, too specific to be mere coincidence. The accompanying brief paragraph spoke of a local hand mime used during certain harvest festivals to convey blessings or warnings. It was a fleeting reference, a single sentence lost amidst pages of agricultural advice and quirky superstitions, yet for Dr. Thorne it was a seismic shift. This wasn't merely an artistic eccentricity, it was a codified gesture, a fragment of a lost communication system. The mystery escalated, morphing from an intriguing puzzle into a profound historical revelation. If this folk tradition existed, however brief its mention, then the meticulous hand positions in the portrait were undoubtedly deliberate, carrying a specific intentional message. With this breakthrough, Dr. Thorne's perception of the portrait sharpened. He began to see the siblings not just as subjects, but as messengers. He revisited the painting with a renewed intensity, his gaze now attuned to every minuscule detail. He noticed the slight fraying at the cuff of the eldest sister's dress, a detail he had previously attributed to wear and tear, but now wondered if it indicated poverty or hardship. The younger brother's tightly clutched toy horse, once just a prop of childhood, now seemed to possess a deeper symbolism. Was it a representation of escape, travel, or perhaps a cherished memory? Even the faint floral pattern on the background wallpaper, initially dismissed as generic decor, started to appear unique, perhaps a specific local blossom with its own associated folklore. These were not just clues, they were components of a larger narrative, waiting to be assembled. Driven by this incredible discovery, Dr. Thorne plunged deeper into historical records, specifically those pertaining to the region where the portrait was believed to have originated, a remote agricultural pocket of the country, historically insular and fiercely protective of its traditions. He scoured microfiches of local newspapers, church registries, and even personal diaries from antiquarian book dealers. Slowly, painstakingly, he began to unearth fragmented local legends and historical anecdotes that echoed the obscure reference he had found. There were whispers of certain families, particularly those living in the isolated valleys, who maintained unusual practices. These were tales of intricate, non-verbal communications often passed down from generation to generation, sometimes referred to as the whispering language or the silent tongue. These practices were rarely documented, existing primarily as oral traditions, fading into obscurity as modernity encroached. One particular legend resonated strongly, a tale of a family during a time of great hardship, perhaps a famine, or a local conflict, who communicated vital information through a series of hand gestures during public gatherings where speaking openly was dangerous. This whispering language allowed them to convey warnings, share news of secret caches of food, or even coordinate escape plans, all under the unsuspecting gaze of authorities who understood only spoken words. The legend suggested the gestures were complex, symbolic, and deeply personal to the families who used them, their meanings intertwined with local proverbs and natural phenomena. His hypothesis solidified. The hand positions in the portrait were not just part of a folk tradition, but a part of this specific forgotten communication system, a silent testament to a hidden narrative from an era where privacy and subtle defiance were paramount. He became obsessed with understanding this unique form of expression, finding it almost entirely absent from scholarly works, mentioned only in the most fleeting, enigmatic ways within local histories. It was a cultural artifact buried beneath layers of time and neglect, a secret language waiting for its decipherer. The realization was profound. This wasn't just about an art piece, but about reclaiming a lost voice, understanding a silent plea from generations long past. Dr. Thorne felt an undeniable pull, a responsibility to listen, to learn, and to finally articulate what these silent hands had been struggling to say for centuries. His research became a quest, imbued with a deeply personal significance far beyond the confines of academic pursuit. Armed with this burgeoning conviction, Dr. Thorne knew his next step was inevitable, albeit daunting. He had exhausted the archival resources. His digital searches yielded diminishing returns, and the dusty academic texts offered no further illumination. The answers, he felt, lay not in ancient manuscripts or scholarly interpretations, but in the very earth and spirit of the place where the portrait had been born. He made the decision to travel, to embark on a pilgrimage to the rural, isolated area in the country's rugged interior, a journey that would echo the arduous research he had already undertaken. This was no mere academic field trip. It was an expedition into the heart of a forgotten history, a deliberate immersion into the landscape that had shaped the lives and secrets of the siblings in the portrait. The journey itself was a test of his resolve. The roads leading into the region were winding, often unpaved, fading into narrow dirt tracks that hugged the sides of ancient hills. Villages were sparse, separated by vast stretches of untouched wilderness, where the air hummed with a silence unfamiliar to city dwellers. He drove for days, his modern vehicle an incongruous presence against the timeless backdrop of stone cottages and fields tilled by generations of the same families. Each mile deeper into the rugged terrain felt like a step further back in time, away from the familiar markers of civilization and closer to the raw, untamed spirit of the land. He felt a profound sense of isolation, yet also an exhilarating anticipation, as if he were nearing the source of a powerful subterranean current. Upon arriving in the scattering of hamlets that comprised the region closest to the portrait's supposed origin, Dr. Thorne quickly discovered that his academic credentials and polite inquiries held little sway. The locals were not unwelcoming exactly, but deeply reserved, their hospitality tinged with a cautious skepticism. Their gazes were penetrating, assessing, weighing his every word with a quiet gravity he found both intimidating and intriguing. He was an outsider, a city man, with questions about things they considered private, perhaps even sacred. Stories of ancestors, of family traditions, of the very fabric of their lives were not for casual sharing, especially not with a stranger bearing notebooks and an earnest, probing demeanor. He faced a wall of polite but firm resistance, a courteous refusal to delve into matters that were to them simply their own. He learned quickly that direct questions about whispering languages or secret hand gestures were met with blank stares or vague, dismissive replies. Some elders simply shook their heads, claiming no knowledge of such fanciful notions, while others offered cryptic smiles that hinted at deeper understandings they had no intention of revealing. It wasn't hostility, but a profound reluctance, a protective instinct honed over centuries of insularity. These were people who understood the power of silence, the strength in keeping certain things within the family, unburdened by outside interpretation or judgment. Dr. Thorne realized his approach needed to shift from academic interrogation to patient, empathetic engagement. He found himself spending hours in local taverns, drinking weak ale and listening to local chatter, careful not to steer conversations, simply letting them unfold. He offered to help with chores, assisted with small tasks, and slowly, incrementally, began to earn a fragile measure of trust. Days bled into weeks, and just as his hope began to wane, a subtle shift occurred. One afternoon, while sitting outside a small general store sketching the ancient oak that dominated the village square, he noticed an old woman watching him from her porch. Her face was a road map of wrinkles, her eyes a startlingly clear blue. She was Alara, a name he'd heard whispered with respect, a descendant, it was said, of one of the longest-standing families in the valley. She was known for her reclusiveness, rarely engaging with strangers, her presence a quiet fixture of the village landscape. He had tried to approach her before, only to be met with a polite, almost imperceptible turn of her head. This time, however, she met his gaze. There was no smile, no overt invitation, just a long, steady look that held a flicker of something he couldn't quite decipher. After a moment that stretched into an eternity, she slowly rose from her chair, her movements stiff with age, and beckoned him with a slight tilt of her head. His heart quickened. This was it. This was the moment he had been waiting for, the break in the wall of silence. He followed her silently into her small, immaculately kept cottage, its interior smelling of wood smoke, dried herbs, and old paper. She offered him a cup of surprisingly strong, sweet tea, and they sat in silence for another long period, the only sound the gentle ticking of an ancient grandfather clock and the distant bleating of sheep. Finally she spoke, her voice raspy but clear. "You ask about the old ways, the silent ways." It wasn't a question, but a statement, a confirmation of his persistent, respectful inquiry. He simply nodded, his own voice suddenly absent. She observed him, her clear blue eyes seeming to peer directly into his soul. Then, with another slow, deliberate movement, She reached beneath a loose floorboard near the hearth, her gnarled fingers retrieving a small leather-bound journal. Its cover was worn smooth by countless years of handling, its pages yellowed and brittle. She placed it carefully on the small wooden table between them. This belonged to my great-great-grandmother. She was one of them. Her voice held a note of reverence, almost awe. Dr. Thorne's breath caught in his throat. He looked at the journal, then back at Alara, a profound sense of gratitude washing over him. It was a pivotal piece of information, a tangible link to the past he had so desperately sought. He could see, even before opening it, that this was no ordinary diary. The journal, though seemingly an unassuming relic, confirmed every one of his suspicions, every difficult step of his journey, every sleepless night spent poring over obscure texts. It was covered with intricate hand-drawn sketches of figures making specific hand gestures, each accompanied by fragmented poetic verses written in an archaic script. This was it. This was the Rosetta Stone he had searched for, the key to unlocking the hidden language of the portrait, a first fragile glimmer of understanding in the face of centuries of silence. The worn, leather-bound journal, a silent testament to generations of coded whispers, became Dr. Thorne's singular focus. Its pages, brittle with age, held not just sketches of the intricate hand gestures he had glimpsed in the portrait, but also fragmented poetic verses, annotations, and what appeared to be contextual clues for their interpretation. It was a partial dictionary of a forgotten language, an incomplete Rosetta Stone, yet it held the key to unlocking the silence of the past. Dr. Thorne, recognizing the sheer magnitude and specialized nature of the linguistic elements, understood he could not undertake this decipherment alone. Reluctantly, for his academic life had always been a solitary pursuit, he reached out to Dr. Alistair Finch, a renowned linguist specializing in archaic, nonverbal communication systems and obscure dialects. Finch was a formidable intellect, known for his methodical approach and an almost preternatural ability to connect disparate linguistic threads. Their initial conversations were measured, Finch skeptical of Thorne's wild theories, but intrigued by the physical artifact of the journal and the compelling evidence of the portrait. Together they embarked on the painstaking process of decipherment. The journal, while invaluable, was not a simple codebook. It required a nuanced understanding of the regional dialect, the era's cultural idioms, and the specific family's history, all of which Dr. Thorne had meticulously gathered. Finch brought his rigorous analytical framework, breaking down each gesture into its constituent parts, comparing it to known historical signs, and identifying grammatical structures hidden within the silent communication. Hours bled into days, days into weeks, as they hunched over the ancient texts, the portrait serving as a constant visual reference. Each breakthrough felt like a small miracle, a whisper from across the centuries growing infinitesimally louder. A specific hand position, initially thought to represent a greeting, was revealed to be a symbol for danger. Another, seemingly innocuous, translated to our secret. They discovered that entire phrases could be condensed into a single complex gesture, imbued with layers of meaning. As they slowly, meticulously pieced together the meaning of the hand positions in the portrait itself, a narrative began to unfurl, not of conspiracy or grand societal secrets, but of something far more intimate and heart-wrenching. The elder brother's slightly raised palm, fingers splayed, wasn't a casual pose, but a plea for protection. The younger sister's intertwined fingers, tucked partially behind her back, spoke of helplessness or concealed truth. The middle sibling's subtle tilt of the head and specific finger placement wasn't artistic flourish, but a gesture conveying witness or burden. It was a story told in fragments, emotion etched into every nuanced angle and curve of their hands. The message wasn't about a hidden treasure or a political plot. It was a testament to extreme vulnerability. The hands of the siblings, frozen in time, were not exchanging coded messages of rebellion, but expressing a shared grief, a plea for understanding, and perhaps a silent vow of solidarity amidst an unspeakable hardship. Dr. Thorne felt a profound shift in his understanding. This wasn't merely an academic exercise in decoding. It was an archaeological dig into the human heart. Each translated gesture added another layer to a deeply personal tragedy. The children in the portrait, far from projecting defiance, were expressing a silent lament, a desperate attempt to record their truth in a world where their spoken words were perhaps forbidden, ignored, or unsafe. The linguistic expert Dr. Finch, initially detached and analytical, also found himself visibly moved. He remarked that the language, though simple in its individual components, was incredibly rich in emotional conveyance, designed not for broad communication, but for profound, intimate expression of shared experience. The precise arrangement of their hands, mirroring each other in subtle ways, suggested a collective burden, a secret so immense it could only be conveyed through this silent, almost sacred means. It spoke of isolation, not necessarily physical, but emotional, a feeling of being alone with their truth, unable to share it openly with the adults around them. The hands in the portrait weren't just signs. They were silent tears, unspoken fears, and an unyielding bond between siblings caught in circumstances beyond their control. Dr. Thorne felt tears welling in his own eyes as the weight of their story pressed down on him. The academic distance he had always maintained between himself and his subjects crumbled. He wasn't deciphering a code anymore. He was bearing witness to a profound human suffering preserved across centuries. The hand positions weren't just words, they were echoes of a past sorrow finally given a voice. The full revelation struck Dr. Thorne with the force of a physical blow, a chilling, emotional tide washing over him as the linguistic expert, a quiet woman named Dr. Evelyn Reed, with an uncanny knack for archaic dialects and forgotten symbols, finally laid out the complete translation. The hand positions, combined with the subtle elements of their attire and the implied setting, weren't just a series of words. They formed sentences, paragraphs, a coherent and devastating narrative. It was not a tale of a grand conspiracy or a secret society's hidden agenda, as he had half speculated in his early, more sensational theories. Instead, it was a deeply personal, heartbreaking confession, an act of desperate communication from individuals trapped by their circumstances. The eldest sibling, the stoic boy on the left, his fingers meticulously curled, conveyed a message of profound responsibility, almost a lament. His gesture spoke of a burden, a heavy secret he was forced to carry, possibly alone. The words translated to something like, "I bear the weight for us all, though my heart is broken." The middle child, the girl with the slightly downturned gaze, her hands forming a more intricate, almost protective shape, communicated a plea for understanding, a hidden sorrow. Her message, painstakingly pieced together by Dr. Reed, spoke of a loss, not of life, but of innocence, of freedom, perhaps even of identity. "They took what was ours," her silent hands seemed to whisper, "and we must never forget." It was a message imbued with both grief and a nascent, fierce determination. And the youngest, the small child on the right, whose hand position, initially the most puzzling, now revealed itself as a desperate, almost childlike yearning for solace and memory. Their gesture signified a promise, a vow to remember what had been lost and to ensure its story was preserved, even if only in silence. The phrase that emerged from the final decryption was chilling. "This truth, whispered in shadows, shall someday speak." The decoded message revealed a tragic family secret, a story of an injustice that had ripped through their lives, leaving indelible scars. It was not a physical betrayal, but an insidious one, perhaps the forced sale of ancestral land under duress, or the imposition of an unfair social or political mandate that stripped them of their autonomy and livelihood. The details were vague enough in the whispering language to be universal, yet precise enough to convey the profound impact on their individual lives. It was clear now that they couldn't openly speak about this injustice due to fear, reprisal, or perhaps the social conventions of the time that suppressed dissent, especially from those without power. The portrait was their silent testimony, a way to record their truth for any future decipherer, a desperate hope that someday someone would understand their plight. The portrait, once a static, beautiful, but enigmatic image, now spoke volumes. The subtle lighting, the carefully chosen fabric of their clothes, the very arrangement of their bodies, all these elements gained new meaning under the harsh light of their revealed truth. It wasn't merely a family posing for posterity. It was an act of quiet defiance, a desperate attempt to communicate their anguish and keep their story alive. The siblings' silent plea, etched into the very fabric of the painting, told a tale of resilience, of hidden courage, and of their desperate attempt to communicate beyond their immediate circumstances. Their dignified expressions, previously interpreted as typical Victorian stoicism, now appeared as masks of profound sadness, carefully constructed to hide the turbulent emotions beneath. The painting wasn't just a visual representation. It was an archive of sorrow, a testament to enduring human spirit in the face of profound adversity. Dr. Thorne, who had approached the portrait with the detached curiosity of an art historian, found himself profoundly moved by the story. The academic distance he usually maintained evaporated, replaced by an overwhelming sense of empathy and connection. He felt a profound, almost spiritual connection to the siblings, having become the unwitting conduit through which their voices, silenced for over a century, could finally be heard. The dusty canvas transformed into a living, breathing entity pulsating with the echoes of their unspoken words. He felt the immense weight of their trust, the burden of their secret now his to share with the world. It was no longer just about deciphering a code. It was about honoring their legacy, about giving voice to the voiceless, about acknowledging their suffering and their courage. This was the true magic of history. He realized, not merely the reconstruction of facts, but the resurrection of human experience. He, the meticulous scholar, had become the keeper of a sacred trust, tasked with ensuring that the whispers of the past finally received their deserved audience. His hands trembled slightly as he looked at the portrait, no longer seeing paint on canvas, but the yearning eyes of three children who simply wanted their truth to be known. The profound emotional impact of the sibling story spurred Dr. Thorne into action, transforming his academic pursuit into a mission to honor their truth. He understood that this discovery transcended the dusty halls of academia. It was a human story that demanded to be heard by a wider audience. He meticulously crafted his findings, not merely as a scholarly article destined for a niche journal, but as a compelling narrative, weaving together the painstaking research, the linguistic breakthroughs, and the heartbreaking personal tragedy. His publication, initially presented at a prestigious art history conference, was unlike anything the seasoned attendees had ever encountered. He presented not just the methodological process of decryption, but the very human cost behind the coded gestures, allowing the siblings' silent voices to reverberate through the auditorium. The academic world, often slow to embrace radical new interpretations, was stunned by the sheer depth of his work and the undeniable evidence he presented. The portrait, once an obscure artifact among countless others, suddenly gained international attention. Art historians, linguists, cultural anthropologists, and even psychologists began to pore over his research, re-evaluating their own methodologies. Dr. Thorne's work didn't just decipher a single message, it redefined how scholars viewed subtle details in art, opening up entirely new avenues of inquiry into nonverbal communication within historical artifacts. It challenged the prevailing wisdom that historical records were solely found in written documents, revealing that emotions, warnings, and pleas could be embedded in the very fabric of visual culture, waiting patiently for the right key to unlock them. The implications were immense, causing ripples throughout various disciplines, prompting researchers to revisit countless other portraits, sculptures, and even architecture with a newfound sensitivity to latent semiotics. Suddenly, every carefully placed hand, every subtle tilt of a head, every seemingly innocuous object in a historical depiction was scrutinized not just for aesthetic value, but for potential hidden narratives. The public reaction was equally, if not more, intense. News of the whispering portrait spread like wildfire, captivating imaginations across the globe. People were spellbound by the story of the siblings and their silent message, a testament to enduring human spirit and the desperate need to communicate one's truth, even in the face of overwhelming odds. The idea that a seemingly ordinary painting could hold such a profound, secret dialogue resonated deeply, particularly in an age increasingly saturated with overt communication, yet often lacking genuine connection. The portrait became an instant cultural phenomenon, a symbol of hidden narratives and the incredible power of nonverbal communication. It sparked renewed interest in forgotten traditions, local histories, and the often overlooked narratives of marginalized voices throughout history. Museums saw an unprecedented surge in visitors, eager to see the speaking painting, and discussions about the deeper meanings of historical art dominated cultural forums and social media. Dr. Thorne, who had always preferred the quiet solitude of his study and archives, found himself a reluctant public figure. Invitations poured in from universities, museums, and media outlets worldwide. He, the meticulous scholar known for his introverted nature, was suddenly thrust into the spotlight, interviewed on television, quoted in major newspapers, and celebrated as the man who gave voice to the voiceless. He handled the newfound fame with grace and humility, always deflecting attention from himself and redirecting it back to the siblings and their extraordinary story. He saw his role not as a celebrated academic, but as a custodian of their legacy, driven by an unwavering desire to ensure their truth was not only heard, but understood and respected. The weight of their unspoken words, which he had felt so acutely, now fueled his every public appearance, motivating him to articulate their plight with clarity and compassion. He became an eloquent advocate for untold histories, for the nuanced interpretations of art, and for the profound value of listening to the whispers of the past. This unexpected shift into the public eye brought about a significant personal transformation for Dr. Thorne. He realized that the profound impact of his work extended far beyond the confines of academic circles. His research, once a personal intellectual quest, now had the power to educate, inspire, and deeply move people from all walks of life. The intellectual satisfaction of solving a complex puzzle was now intertwined with the emotional gratification of bringing closure to a centuries-old injustice. He learned that while facts and evidence were paramount, it was the human story, the empathy it evoked, that truly resonated and created lasting change. He started to see his role differently, not just as an interpreter of the past, but as a bridge builder between epochs, connecting the silent pleas of the long dead with the understanding hearts of the living. This journey, initiated by a simple, unsettling curiosity about hand positions, had fundamentally altered his perspective on history, art, and his own purpose within them. He was no longer just Dr. Eris Thorne, art historian. He was the voice of the whispering portrait, a guardian of forgotten truths, and a testament to the enduring power of human connection across time. The subtle change in his own hand gestures, now more open, more expressive, mirrored the opening of his own heart to the profound narratives hidden in plain sight. The weight of that sacred trust propelled Dr. Thorne forward, transforming his singular academic pursuit into a mission of profound human significance. The siblings' hidden message, after centuries of silence, was finally brought to light, giving them a voice and a closure they never achieved in life. Their silent plea, a desperate whisper across generations, was now heard and acknowledged by a world eager to listen. The full story, revealed through meticulous research and empathetic decipherment, resonated deeply, not just within the hallowed halls of academia, but across wider public consciousness. The injustice they faced, The quiet suffering they endured became a poignant testament to the human spirit's enduring need to communicate truth, even when faced with insurmountable obstacles. Dr. Thorne reflected on the extraordinary journey, a path riddled with initial skepticism, painstaking research, and moments of profound doubt. He vividly recalled the dismissive looks from colleagues, the frustrating dead ends in archives, and the initial resistance from the isolated community, yet each hurdle, each moment of despair had only fortified his resolve. The ultimate reward of uncovering such a deeply human truth, of giving voice to the long silenced, far outweighed every challenge. He understood now with an almost spiritual clarity that every artifact, every brushstroke, every faded photograph held countless stories, waiting patiently in the shadows of history, ready to be revealed by a patient and empathetic eye. These were not merely objects, they were vessels of human experience, echoes of lives lived, loves lost, and injustices suffered. The portrait, once a curious historical item, now held a place of honor in a prominent international museum, its story serving as a poignant reminder of the enduring power of human expression and the countless historical secrets hidden in plain sight. It was placed under soft, reverent light, capturing the subtle nuances of the siblings' expressions, now understood not as stoic indifference, but as profound, dignified sorrow. Informational plaques, written with Dr. Thorne's guidance, detailed not only the artistic techniques, but more importantly, the heartbreaking narrative of their coded message. Visitors flocked to see it, drawn not just by its artistic merit, but by the compelling human drama it encapsulated. They stood in quiet reverence, contemplating the lives of these three children who found a singular, ingenious way to leave their indelible mark on history. The attention Dr. Thorne received for his groundbreaking work was immense, and at first overwhelming for the quiet academic. He became a reluctant celebrity, navigating television interviews and international conferences, always careful to direct the spotlight back to the siblings and their extraordinary story. He used every platform to advocate for a more empathetic approach to historical interpretation, urging scholars and the public alike to look beyond the obvious, to listen for the whispers between the lines, and to foreground the human element in every historical artifact. He championed the idea that history was not just a collection of dates and facts, but a rich tapestry woven from individual lives, each thread holding its own unique narrative. His personal life, once confined to the quiet solitude of his study, expanded to include unexpected collaborations and friendships. The linguistic expert he'd brought in, Dr. Alara Vance, became a close colleague, their shared passion for deciphering hidden languages forging a strong intellectual bond. Together they embarked on new projects, always with the same core philosophy, to unearth the neglected voices of the past. The reclusive descendant who had given him the journal, an elderly woman named Martha, maintained a sporadic correspondence with him, sharing further anecdotes and local lore, grateful that her ancestor's story was finally being told with the respect and understanding it deserved. Dr. Thorne often revisited the museum, standing before the portrait, a quiet smile gracing his lips. He saw not just the siblings, but the countless other silent figures in historical paintings, in old photographs, in forgotten texts, all waiting for their turn to speak. His initial fascination, born of an academic puzzle, had blossomed into a profound understanding of human resilience and the universal need for connection and truth. The portrait, with its subtle coded hand gestures, had not only revealed a specific historical narrative, but it also transformed Dr. Thorne, etching empathy and a renewed sense of purpose onto his very soul. It was a powerful reminder that history is not just about the grand narratives, but about the deeply personal stories that often lie hidden beneath the surface, waiting for someone patient enough and empathetic enough to truly see them. This journey ignited within him a lifelong quest to seek out other hidden narratives, to approach every piece of art and every historical document as a potential repository of unspoken truths. He became a beacon for a new kind of historical scholarship, one that prioritized the human voice, however faint, however coded. The siblings, through their silent defiance, had not only found their own voice but had also inspired countless others to search for the hidden messages that permeate our shared past. What other secrets do you think old portraits might hold? Let us know in the comments below. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more intriguing historical mysteries. And check out our next video, where we explore another forgotten piece of art with a hidden message.